Look it up. Project 2025, it's not a game. Listen, before we get into Project 2025, and it's interesting, let's take a look, starting off, at this Atlantic article, which is one of the worst journalistic abominations you've ever read. If you haven't read it, it'll be one of the worst journalistic abominations you've ever had explained to you. This thing is atrocious. It's pure propaganda. The rhetoric on the left, and we don't play the paradigm, I'm just pointing out, who these people are. They've become desperate to the point they're just openly lying. Their message is false, saturated with fear-mongering and gaslighting. So let's start off with this article. The title of the article is, do you have a graphic of that article for us? Until then, I've got that. This is from The Economist, from the cover of The Economist this week.
It's up.
Yeah, Biden with, pop back over here for a second. Let them see that. This was on the cover of The Economist here.
As over the top as they can possibly make it.
There was that, and then last week there was this on Time Magazine. What do we have here? Oh yeah, The Atlantic. There you go. I did have a graphic for it. So I've got one over the shoulder.
Right on.
Here. All right.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to lead the masses along, aren't they?
So the article starts out in The Atlantic. It says, if the president wants to protect American democracy, he should hand over his office to Kamala Harris. Well, all right. They start off in the first paragraph saying, Richard Nixon had to resign because he led an assault on American democracy. Note they use the term democracy, as if that's the official, as if that's really what kind of system of government we have. The founders specifically did not set up a democracy for many good reasons. And one of them was, to avoid the inevitability of tyrants controlling the way, they say that the pure democracy is like mob rule. So you don't want that. You want representatives from areas to go and vote for the people if they do that right. Anyway, Nixon had to resign because he led an assault on American democracy. Biden must resign for the opposite reason. And they say that opposite reason is to give American democracy its best chance of surviving. What they mean to say is Biden must resign to save the country from Donald Trump. It goes on down to the next paragraph. The next two paragraphs are really telling. It starts off and says, the American right has spent every day since Biden was nominated in 2020 presenting him as an incompetent, doddering old fool incapable of discharging the responsibilities of the office. It goes down to the next paragraph and says, subsequent reporting has confirmed that Biden's condition is worse than Democrats had been willing to publicly admit. So, was the American right? Right? Or was the American right wrong? Anyway, let's. This article really is. It's manipulation. It is an example of reflexive alchemy, which we talked about. Was that the last show or the second to last show?
I believe it was the last show.
Yeah, where Marxists, and whether they know they're Marxists or not, they've been indoctrinated with that theology. Marxism is a religion, there's no question. So what they believe is that it's the dialectic. And dialectic means conflict. It means debate, right? But to them it means conflict. And so they believe that the way you push progress, the way you move things, the way you control history and get the results you want is by causing conflict. That's how history plays out, through conflict, they believe. Well, here you go. This is intended to rile you up. This is intended to cause you to react. Because when you react, they've got you. You're right in their hands. The Trumpified Supreme Court's decision on Monday, granting imperial powers to any president, is that what it did? We're going to look at that decision in just a moment, and I'm going to share a couple opinions that are different opinions about it. But you're going to find out the truth about that Supreme Court immunity decision. Any granting imperial powers to any president unscrupulous enough to use them has raised the stakes of the election tremendously, and they were already too high, right? Our very democracy is at stake, they say. Kevin Roberts. Let's see here. Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, which aspires to staff a future Trump administration, that would be Project 2025, has made clear that the MAGA right contemplates using this newfound imperial power to employ political violence against its opposition. Summer. Here is the Atlantic saying that Donald Trump wants to use political violence against his opposition. Or his
Projection.
That is projection. That's all they've done. And of course, this is the sign, one of the signs of a narcissist, right? A narcissist will accuse you of the very thing they're doing, right?
That's right.
Well, Kevin Roberts, we'll get back to him in a minute because he's on the hot seat with the left too. He's the president, I think, of the Heritage Foundation. I'll play some clips from Kevin. If you don't remember him, you will, because we've played his clips before here. He said we're in the process of the Second American Revolution. We'll get back to that in a minute. Remember, if you hadn't heard, he's the one who said, and this Second American Revolution will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be. And that really shook them up. They have seized on that quote, and they're trying to get as much mileage out of it as they can. But Trump supporters seem less to wish to govern than to rule indefinitely by force. Right? They say that Trump's supporters want to rule indefinitely by force. There's no evidence of that anywhere. The only evidence we see of someone trying to rule by force so far is the group that's in power now. And I will say, though, that both of them, Biden and Trump, have been a bit too cavalier in using the police and militarized police against the people. But that's another discussion. Right. If Biden is incapable of campaigning because of his deterioration, he is also not capable of being president. So the Atlantic, the New York Times, they're piling on, while the people around Biden are sticking by him for now. Kamala Harris comes out. She's standing by him. She's waiting for her. If Barack Obama decides that there's going to be a new candidate, there'll be a new candidate, and everyone will fall in line. And that might happen at any time, because it's getting ugly. I haven't seen it yet, but I know that Biden did an interview today with George Snuffleupagus. Stephanopoulos, sorry. But we'll see how that turned out. I don't know, it couldn't have gone good. There was, let's see, there's this is a flag burning in New York today.
We hear all the time about misinformation.
That's the wrong thing there. I had a clip of Biden.
Leaders on the right are...
No, that's not it. I had a clip of Biden making some comments, but I don't think I have it anymore. Yeah, I lost it. It's all right. Now, let's get down to the meat of this article. So, of course, they're telling him he has to withdraw because they want anyone else. They want Kamala. That's what the Atlantic and the New York Times are saying. They want Kamala. It does no good to point out that Trump was deranged but energetic at the debate, that he rambles incoherently, that he is a criminal, an authoritarian, and a racist.
Projection.
Now, you can call him a criminal. That's fine. He's been convicted of something. kangaroo court or not, he's convicted, right? Well, okay, he's a criminal. But we're going to get to that Supreme Court decision in a moment. Because all you've heard now for a week, King Trump, they've made the presidency a dictatorship. Hang on. You'll see. He should resign. They don't want him to just not run for president and just finish out his term. They want him to step aside completely and hand the keys to the kingdom over to Kamala Harris. By the way, did you know that if that happened, you know who the vice president would be?
Johnson.
Would be Mike Johnson.
Mike Johnson.
You'd have a Democrat president and a Republican vice president, which would be very interesting. That hasn't happened for a long time. I know there's probably, I was reading some articles, there's few decisions, there's a few votes within the House that would have to be made, but that's the order of succession. But anyway, Trump was deranged and he rambled incoherently at the debate. I'm here to tell you that the Atlantic they don't have anything to offer. As far as I know, this is not shocking.
They're just there as psychological warfare.
They're playing the game. They're putting out the message that's intended to rile you up. So it's obviously incontestably true that a senile president with a competent and ethical staff would be better than an authoritarian one who wants to fill his administration with guys who sound like school shooter manifestos. By what standard do they determine whether someone's deranged or not? By what standard do they determine whether someone rambles incoherently or not? That's amazing. Now, the Atlantic is one of the premier print media outlets out there.
Yeah, and it's old, too. It's been around like over 100 years, I think.
Yeah, and they haven't always been this terrible, but they have jumped the shark. It's over. There's no clear way to know if Harris is a politically riskier option than Biden, but if Biden's mental state is as bad as it appeared at the debate, then there is no other choice. So that tells you what they care about right there. They don't care about America. They'll tell you it's all about our democracy. It's about saving our country. They don't care about the country. Progressives care about victory at all costs, even at the cost of the country. That's the truth. All right, Trump's implicit promise to restore racial and gender hierarchies. Evidence. Can someone show us any evidence where Trump wants to reinstitute racial hierarchies? Or gender hierarchies, for that matter? Who has been more kind to gay marriage and the LGBT community than Donald Trump? Right, we pointed this out in the last show that in 2008, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton both campaigned against gay marriage. In 2016, Donald Trump campaigned as an advocate for gay marriage. None of this makes any sense. They want power. That's all it is. All right, Trump's brain trust, Republican, decided that Republican nominees in 2016, John McCain and Mitt Romney, had failed to mobilize demoralized white voters because they had not been overtly racist enough, and that the path to victory lay through deliberate racial polarization. Now, I'm not here to defend Trump on his morals, but he's not a racist. I mean, not anything that we can tell from his public performance. Anyway, if Biden merely steps aside as the nominee and then the Trump campaign can play on racist fears of what a Harris presidency might bring. The only group that's demonstrating racism is this group, the Atlantic, and if we want to call them the left. They are clearly, all they can think about is race.
Identity politics.
Well, no doubt. In a dark echo of the lurid 19th century warnings of Negro domination, they say, the phrase DEI president will be on Fox News faster than the Millennium Falcon can do the Kessel Run. All right. Harris, by her own example, is best positioned to diffuse any race baiting in which the Trump campaign engages. evidence of one time where the Trump campaign or Trump has race baited. That's what they do. All right. Biden says has put money in the pockets of low. They're going to give his successes now. Biden has put money in the pockets of low-wage workers, revitalized American industry, and thanks to recent agreements with Mexico, Biden has stemmed a rise in illegal immigration that has been the subject of hysterical white right-wing propaganda. Now that, my friends, that is a comedy routine. Right? Illegal immigration, that's a hysterical right-wing propaganda. You'll see why in a moment, you'll understand why we're hammering on this article so much. It's because of this 2025 Project 2025 that the media now has focused in on. We're going to explain it for you. We're going to explain why they're so breathlessly panicked about that. They don't care about Project 2025. They want to keep power, and they'll point out anything they can find. And we'll play Kevin. What's his name again, son? Oh, I forgot his name. President of Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts. Okay, now this is an interesting piece right here, too. Even crime is down dramatically. Is it? Crime is down dramatically from the Trump era. I think I remember in Trump's last year in office, the left supported a huge crime wave in the summer of 2020. I think we clearly saw that happen. But Trumpism is about offering status, hierarchy, and domination to its rank-and-file voters in exchange for an upward redistribution of power and income to its elites. I don't doubt that they'll probably play some favorites there. That's what politicians do. And that is not what Biden is offering. So you hear that, son? Mm-hmm. Biden doesn't do that. Biden doesn't help out his rich friends. He doesn't do that.
No, he would never.
No, he doesn't do that. He doesn't do business with foreign corporations either while he's in.
Yeah, we've never seen him do that.
This is projection, and it actually reveals what they believe. Right? It's actually an exposure of themselves. The author of the writer here says, I understand that many liberals and Democrats feel that the political press has been out to destroy Biden. I have observed that newsrooms have moved toward the right in framing and tone since 2020. Have they? So this would imply that the media has not protected Biden since 2020. They turned on him in the last week, but that's by design. We can clearly tell that. Likely a reaction to the common criticism that they were too harsh on Trump and too supportive of the protests or the riots that followed George Floyd's death, period. And I was telling Summer, I thought it was very interesting that they didn't say George Floyd's murder there, because the evidence is clear. It's out there now. Nobody talks about it because it's not allowed to be talked about. It was an OD. It's clear. Now, no, that doesn't mean that it's still not a tragedy. It's obviously a tragedy. It's just they didn't tell us the truth. The Biden era has been bad for the media business. Seriously. Trumpist criminality and authoritarianism is old news. In other words, they need Biden to step aside and allow Harris to take her best shot at saving the country from those who would destroy it. So that's the claim. The claim is this: we have to stop Trump at all costs because he will ruin our country, our democracy.
Which is exactly what they plan on doing.
Exactly. So let's look at, there's so much here. By the way, here's a shot of, I think this is Washington Square again. Yesterday, maybe it was today, I don't know. This is Freedom News TV again. These are people who really love the country. They're really interested in saving the country. These entitled little weenies, as they stand in the freest nation that's ever existed. they burn its flag. And look, they have the right to do it. I don't think they should, but they have the right to do it. It doesn't mean that they're right for doing it. And then this guy shows up to, take the different position. They call him a terrorist. The guy wrapped in the flag, they call it there. He's also got a shiner under that right eye, it looks like.
I was assaulted. What happened?
Yeah, somebody assaulted him for wearing a flag. So these people really care about... There's another skirmish. This guy had enough. He doesn't appreciate them hating on the country where he's free.
Well, for them, no action is violence. So to not be, I mean, for them, it's full-on war. I mean, this is their modus.
That's right. All right, I have to move up here to the 3-minute mark here. Bear with me. All right.
Or should I say lack thereof, performance. But yeah, they're desperate and they know that.
I want to show this clip because what we've just read from the Atlantic, and this is pretty much what you're getting everywhere now. Trump is the danger. Trump is the liar. He's Hitler. And he's going to destroy the nation.
Nothing harnesses, especially the female fury of the US. We saw this when Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court. I mean, you've just not seen scenes like that for a very long time. This gets people on both sides, whether you're pro or anti, absolutely rabid. And she is trying, by lying, to make women believe that nationwide there's just going to be a complete kibosh on abortions. It is a lie, but she's doing it in order, I guess, appealing to the lowest common denominator who doesn't know well enough. The community note that X then slapped on her tweet literally said, I quote, President Trump has repeatedly said he will not sign a national abortion ban, and had 5 links attached so that if people were questioning the community note, they could click on any number of those 5 links and watch him say it, like we just played for folks watching back home. So it was completely blown out of the water the minute she posted it. But again, if you're appealing to the lowest common denominator, then you're going to get those ropeable people that you're after. But of course, that didn't even stop her from then releasing this completely cringe video, once again trying to appeal to women on the basis of, we're protecting your reproduction rights, Trump's going to take them away.
Fundamental right on your freedoms coming from, I'd like to know. Because they like to say reproductive rights. What does that mean? When was the last time you saw anybody stop a woman from having sex? Like, when did the police ever show up and say, no, you may not finish this sex act? Because that's what reproductive rights would be. Once you're pregnant, you've already exercised your reproductive right. Then you're pregnant. Then that's obviously. Let's look at some of what's her name again? Kamala's Twitter feed here. She's got some new campaign ads that are fun to look at.
Full capital injury.
The president is now a king above the law. Okay. That's her bottom line in her dissent. Sotomayor.
That's the claim we're going to address in just a moment. Has the Supreme Court created a dictator?
He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
Revenge does take time, and sometimes revenge can be justified based on what they've done. I would have every right to go after them.
And who would doubt that?
Of a king, under the belief that nearly 250 years ago, America was founded in defiance of a king, under the belief that no one is above the law, not even the president, until now. The same Trump Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade ruled that the president can ignore the law even to commit a crime.
Didn't say that. Didn't say that at all. Now, that term absolute immunity is in there. We'll show you in just a minute. They came up with a 3-tier test for whether or not a president can be, whether he has immunity for an act or not. I'll show it to you in just a minute.
Because Donald Trump asked them to. He's already led an insurrection and threatened to be a dictator on day.
Who led the insurrection? Summer, who led the insurrection? Who was that? I know you don't have to say, but I mean, don't we all know what that was by now? Is it not more than obvious what that was, the J6 thing that you can't talk about here either because we're suddenly living in Soviet
It's a joke.
America?
It's a total joke.
Yeah, so really what the Project 2025 is, let's check out this ad too.
Did you see Trump last night? I mean it sincerely, the most lies told in a single debate. He lied about the great economy he created. He lied about the pandemic he botched. And then, his biggest lie, he lied about how he had nothing to do with the insurrection of January 6th. We all saw it with our own eyes.
I mean, there's video of Pelosi taking responsibility for it on the day it happened.
Walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you.
We saw police being attacked, the Capitol being ransacked. He did not a single thing to stop it, nothing. Folks.
I don't know. I should have found it for this show. I've got a video. I'll have to I believe it is in a short. Maybe I should look right quick. Of an agent. And we're talking about here, let's see. Let me find it. I think I might be able to find this right quick. Of an agent on that day, on that January, the day after the 5th. I have to get there like this. Openly admitting how they infiltrate the crowd. So it's a short that we did. Man, I don't know if it's still up. I may have taken it down out of fear. Well, let's see. Maybe it's still here. He was some kind of intelligence agent. He was probably FBI or something. And he was helping one of the Capitol officers get tear gas out of his eye with milk or something. And he was explaining how, we infiltrate the crowd, we pretend to be Antifa, we pretend to be... Boy, I don't know if I've got it, I don't know if I can find it or not. Yeah, I believe it's probably too far back. Goodness. Well, that would have been good if I would have remembered that for this show. That would have been helpful. Well, Project 2025, it's where it says on the website here. Here's the website. There we go. And Summer's got some graphics for us too. It's not enough for conservatives to win elections. If we're going to rescue the country from the grip of the radical left, we need both a governing agenda and the right people in place ready to carry this agenda out on day one of the next conservative administration. This is the goal of the 2025 Presidential Transition Project, or Project 2025. The project will build on 4 pillars that will collectively pave the way for an effective conservative administration. Okay, first of all, let's jump back over here. Let's let you hear what they say about Project 2025, and then we'll respond.
Oh, I love that she did that. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in the East. No, it's not a game, and this is not a drill. Project 2025 is their plan. It is serious. It's in writing. It's public. It is a chilling approach to running our federal government that got all the more chilling after the Supreme Court granted Donald Trump absolute immunity. It's the plan that Trump would implement on day one.
Again, there's the claim. They granted him absolute immunity. That's not the truth. That's what it says in the decision, in Roberts' concurring decision. But that's not the truth.
Should he prevail in the November election and end up back in the Oval Office? That was actress Taraji P. Henson delivering that warning during Sunday's BET Awards to make sure that her audience and all Americans wake up about what is truly at stake this November. A full-scale reimagining of our entire system of government and who runs it in Donald Trump's image and vision. The mission statement for Project 2025 is a plan
which I just read to you. I just read it right from the website for you. Let's see what they say it is.
Assembled by the Heritage Foundation. Sounds like something you'd read on the ex-president's Truth Social feed, and there's no evidence to rebut that that's exactly where it came from. Quote, "It is not enough for conservatives to win elections. If we are going to rescue the country from the grip of the radical left, we need both a governing agenda and the right people in place, ready to carry this agenda out on day one of the next conservative administration."
Okay, what is this, right? What is this Project 2025? You say, well, maybe they shouldn't be doing this. No, this is done every time. Every time it's a general election where a president's going to be elected, whatever, whether it's wherever the election is. Typically, there's a group of Republicans or Democrats that get together like a think tank to decide what should the policies be if we should win the election. What should we try to achieve? And they get together, and this is what the Heritage Foundation does. They're like a think tank. They think of, they try to imagine a more conservative nation. They try to imagine taking us back to
it's like
tradition.
a thing that they do, that they prepare. It's a standard thing that is prepared before a presidency switch.
They're not always good, right? PNAC, the Project for the New American Century. This was where the Republicans got together and came up for a new action plan for when and if George W. Bush was elected, right? And this was the plan to create a condition of perpetual global war. Not wars, not really wars, but it would be these just a constant low-intensity conflict all around the world. That's why we ended up in Iraq again and Afghanistan, and the war hawks got rich. So yeah, but this is always done. There is always, Democrats and Republicans, they always do this. So this is not something that never happens. In fact, there's another one. Another group is doing what's it called, Agenda 47.
That's right.
Right, I think Man in America is covering that tonight. You might want to, guys might want to check that out after this video if you don't mind. He was doing that one live, and he'll be talking about Agenda 47 with 47th president. It's just another Republican.
It gives the policy issues that they're going to be focusing on.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point.
For the conservative right.
All right, let's listen to a little bit more.
Axios has new reporting on what they describe as Trump's imperial presidency in waiting, writing this, quote, "Trump promises an unabashedly imperial presidency, one that would turn the Justice Department against critics, deport millions of people in the U.S. illegally, slap 10% tariffs on thousands of products, fire perhaps tens of..."
First of all, let's go down that list. We're going to just let them tell us what it says, and we'll respond to that. How about that? That's fair, isn't it? Trump promises an unabashedly imperial presidency. Well, that has no need to be there. One that would turn the Justice Department against critics. I'm just curious. Does anybody remember who just got convicted of a felony by his political opponents? Does anybody, I mean... They're just right. Oh, he's going to turn the Justice Department against his opponents.
It's crazy making. Exactly. It's just completely crazy making.
He's going to deport millions of people in the U.S. illegally. Well, they're here illegally. So to deport them wouldn't be illegal. Anyway, slap 10% tariffs on thousands of products. We need a little more context there. What kind of products? That would be imports or companies who are taking their business out of the country. That is intended to help Americans to prosper.
Yeah, these are just all inflammatory statements and not factual.
Yeah.
And very emotional. So it's very cathartic for this particular, people that are more mobilized toward the left, like extreme.
Yeah.
And so they always turn the perpetrator into the victim. It's cluster B dynamics. And they do this on each side, whether it's you know, the rhetoric coming from the right or the rhetoric coming from the left. It's just this constant stream back and forth, and it's not reasonable.
Yeah.
So you can't come to any sort of resolution when one side is just throwing out blatant lies.
All right, let's get to the next little batch here. It's a good point.
Illegally, slap 10% tariffs on thousands of products, fire perhaps tens of thousands of government staff.
Amen. Cut it down, right? I mean,
yeah, because these people want to, you know, bring in the fourth industrial revolution and the Great Reset. Yeah, let's get those people out.
Cut that fat.
Insufficiently loyal. He'd stretch the
they threw that in there, who are deemed insufficiently loyal. They just threw that in there. Of course it doesn't say that.
powers of the presidency in ways not seen in our lifetime. He says this consistently and clearly, so it is not conjecture. A few other headlines from Project 2025.
It's not conjecture, my booty.
Yeah, it's not conjecture. Well, then where are your facts? No,
no facts.
They're just taking comments that he makes.
This is psychological warfare. This is what it looks like.
Yeah, and they're trying to pretend like that the left, especially the Biden regime, they never do this. They don't do that. They don't open the border and allow us to be invaded. They don't goose up inflation purposely.
900-page plus mandate, putting Christianity at the center of American life and government.
Oh no.
Oh no.
No, that can't happen. No, not Christianity.
Criminalizing the mailing of abortion medication, the most common form of abortion.
Why would they do that? Because it's crossing state lines. In some states where it's illegal, it would be the same as if you're trying to send cocaine over the border, or maybe just some other product or good that is illegal in one state but not in another. It would be a federal crime to send it across state lines like that. That's not unusual. There's 1,000 instances where that kind of a law is in effect. But of course, because it's abortion, no, that is their sacrament. That is the sacrament for the religious left.
Take the word abortion out.
Yeah, take the word of abortion out of all laws.
What? Okay, take the word out.
Care, criminalizing sending that through the mail.
Yeah.
Taking the word abortion out of all laws, policies, and regulations, as well as terms relating to gender and sexual identity.
Oh, yeah, so we can't. Yeah, so they just want to get the silly pronoun gender stuff out of our documents, out of our law, out of our legal documents. I think that makes sense too. Remove protections for the environment. What that really means is that they want to stop throwing money into a climate pit.
Removing protections for the environment, denying climate change, eliminating the...
Oh, you can't deny climate change. Now that's a cult. This is how a cult operates, right? You're not... They're going to tell you shouldn't limit our cult. Let me just finish here.
Department of Education.
Eliminate the Department of Education. Again. Yes.
Yeah, that definitely needs an overhaul.
There's no need for the Department of Education at the federal level. No need. Completely unneeded and irrelevant. Every state is responsible.
Not when it teaches propaganda for communism.
Well, and that's what they're doing.
I know.
And that's one of the reasons that I'm sure that the Heritage Foundation is thinking that let's eliminate the Department of Education because they're strong-arming the states to teach their Common Core, which is now social-emotional learning.
That's right. Critical theory,
but now it's not called that. Now it's called social-emotional learning.
Well, they've always got to rebrand it so they can try to stay ahead.
Basically, what it means is they're teaching the kids. It's not that they're not teaching them critical thinking. They're teaching them how to think like a Marxist. They're teaching them how to think in dialectic, reflexive alchemy. They're teaching them how to think in those terms. All right, I'm getting down the rabbit hole here.
As the New Republic called it a few months back, quote, a remarkably detailed guide to turning the United States into a fascist paradise.
Or just putting it back the way it was.
And now, after yesterday's seismic ruling from the Supreme Court that an American president has immunity for all official acts, there is legally...
Did you hear that? She actually told the truth there, that the president has immunity for all official acts. So let's just dive into it now. Let's talk about what is the deal with this... I don't have a graphic for that one. You might have to help me out there. I'll go full screen for a bit. Okay, so let's jump in. Maybe first of all, no, we'll get back to it in a minute. I want to tell you what Trump thought about this group. I'll share that with you now before I get into the Supreme Court decision. In Miami today, Donald Trump distanced himself from Project 2025. It doesn't matter. Look, if he wins the presidency, he'll be happy to work with these guys. But anyway, he says, I know nothing about Project 2025. I have no idea who's behind it, and he's probably not telling the truth there. We caught him in a lie. Sure, he knows who it is. I disagree with some of the things they're saying. I wish them luck, but I have nothing to do with them. And that's true. They're the Heritage Foundation. They're not the Trump campaign. Trump has outlined his own plans to remake the government. Listen, Donald Trump doesn't like anybody to be trying to think his thoughts for him, right? He might be a bit of a narcissist himself. You know, I don't know. I don't personally. I don't know. There's think what you want to about what we're watching. How much of it's by design, how much of it is actually organic, but it does seem like they put this guy under quite a bit of pressure over the past year, especially. He could have just said, "I'm not doing it." He could have gone and lived a quiet, posh life, but for some reason, he's still keeping it going. He's still at it. He said, well, of course, he's got his own plans to remake the government if he wins a second term. I don't know about remaking the government. Let's cut all of the craziness that they've put in, including staging the largest deportation in U.S. history. Anyway, some of the people involved in Project 2025 are former senior administration officials. The project director is Paul Dans, who served as chief of staff at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management under Trump. Trump's campaign spokeswoman, Caroline Leavitt, was featured in one of Project 2025's videos. John McEntee, a former director of the White House Presidential Personal Office, in the Trump administration. He's the senior advisor for Project 2025. McEntee told the conservative news site The Daily Wire earlier this year that Project 2025's team would integrate a lot of its work with the campaign after the summer when Trump would announce his transition team. So there's no reason Trump would be necessarily aware of this right now. I'm sure he is. Project 2025 has been preparing its own 180-day agenda for the next administration, which it plans to share privately rather than as part of its public-facing book of priorities for a Republican president. A key Trump ally, Russ Vought, who contributed to Project 2025 and is drafting this final pillar, is also on the Republican National Committee's platform writing committee. So once again, this is nothing new. This is not some kind of secret agenda. This is always done. Both parties do this. A spokesperson for the plan said Project 2025 is not tied to a specific candidate or campaign. It's tied to the party, the Republican Party. We're a coalition of more than 110 conservative groups advocating policy and personnel recommendations for the next conservative president, a statement said. But it's ultimately up to that president, who we believe will be President Trump, to decide which recommendations to implement, right? So Trump could throw it all out. So when the media is telling you now that this is the plan Trump's going to implement, they don't know that. They don't know that. And Trump doesn't take a lot of orders from people.
And, because they've got the quote-unquote fact checkers on their side, they don't get fact-checked.
Well, true. Yeah, of course they don't. They are the fact checkers. Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts said on Steve Bannon's War Room podcast last Tuesday that Republicans are, quote, in the process of taking this country back. They don't like to hear that. And he made these comments too. Let's let you hear this, because this is what they're really up in arms about.
Are applauding the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity including the president of the Heritage Foundation, who says that it's vital to getting the country back, as he gives an ominous warning to the left. Listen.
In spite of all this nonsense from the left, we are going to win. We're in the process of taking this country back. We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
CNN's Kristen Holmes is here. So, Kristen, help us understand what that Second American Revolution that he's promising.
Help us understand. It's not too hard to understand what he means. We all remember the summer of 2020, right? And the city's burning. In many cities, it wasn't safe to go out in the street because mobs, Antifa, BLM, were rioting peacefully. Anyway, of course, it was. Let's hear what she says for a second.
Singing tales.
So before we get started, because I'm going to use this magic wall, I just want to note that I've actually never been allowed to touch this before. So please bear with me as we go through this. Okay, so first let's talk about who that person was. Kevin Roberts. He is the head of the Heritage Foundation. The reason.
You know what? Let me show you who this person
One thing that Davos.
Let me show you who this person is. Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation. A few months ago, I think it was during the Davos, that was in the summer. Mm-hmm. Went to the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
He went to the belly of the beast to give globalist elites a clear message. Americans will not tolerate a woke agenda that strips them of self-governance and liberty. So here, you can decide for yourself. You've heard what Roberts said that everyone's up in arms about. Let's hear what he said back in January when he went over to the World Economic Forum.
You might say, and the people come here stand up for, is liberal democracy.
It's laughable that you would, or anyone would, describe Davos as protecting liberal democracy. I'll be candid here because I think I've been invited here to be candid. Elites tell us that open borders and even illegal immigration are okay. The average person tells us in the United States that both rob them of the American way of life. Elites also tell us that public safety isn't a problem in big American cities. Just travel to New York or Washington or Dallas, Texas. The average person will tell you that the lack of public safety damages not just the American way of life, but their life. Elites tell us that we have this existential crisis with so-called...
Wait a minute. Can I remind you folks, he's at the World Economic Forum here. In the belly of the beast. He's on Klaus Schwab's turf here.
But their life. Elites tell us that we have this existential crisis with so-called climate change. The solutions, the average person know, cost more human lives, especially in Europe during the time that you need heating, than do the problem and the problems themselves. The fourth, China. The number one adversary, not just to the United States, but to free people on planet Earth. Not only do we at Davos not say that, we give the Chinese Communist Party a platform. And fifth, as we sit here, another supranational organization, the World Health Organization, is discussing foisting gender ideology upon the global South. These are practices that are under review, if not being rejected, by countries in Northern Europe. The new president, especially Vice President Trump, will, as you like to say, trust the science. He will understand the basic biological reality of manhood and womanhood. And do you know why? Not because of retribution, not because he's a dictator, but because he has the power of the American people behind him. Let me just correct the slight assertion you made there. We want Ukraine to win. We want to see Ukraine win with a lot more help from European allies. I think the United States has a role. Heritage has been clear about this for 2 years now, that there is a world in which we support military aid for Ukraine. Our first obligation in foreign policy.
There's a point where I don't particularly agree. It doesn't matter to me which side wins over there. I think that's another sort of operation. But anyway, all right, okay, 9 out of 10 ain't bad.
Is to look at it through the lens of what's best for the American citizen. Joe Biden has done a god-awful job in articulating what that is. The kind of person who will come into the next conservative administration is going to be governed by one principle, and that is destroying the grasp that political elites and unelected technocrats have over the average person. And if I may, I will be candid and say that the agenda that every single member of the administration needs to have is to compile a list of everything that's ever been proposed at the World Economic Forum and object all of them wholesale.
Yeah, so come on, man. Listen, folks. Listen. I sound like Joe Biden. Folks. Well, these comments were widely circulated online and blasted. Not these comments, the ones before about the bloodless thing. But this was back in January. I just wanted to give you an idea of who Kevin Roberts is. This man that the left is calling, the ringleader of this imperial presidency. Those comments were blasted by the Biden campaign, of course, which issued a statement saying Trump and his allies were dreaming of a violent revolution. Violent? Why violent? Why did they say violent? To destroy the very idea of America. Listen, we were talking about this earlier. When you're listening to someone who's giving critiques or giving a position, if they don't ever agree with anything the other side has ever said or done, you've got a problem. You've got someone who's just not honest. Okay. So you decide if you think that message was authoritarian, oppressive, or somehow a danger to our democracy. Well, the Democratic National Committee said the plan and the Trump campaign are part of the same MAGA operation. A Biden campaign spokesperson said that Project 2025 staff members are also leading the Republican Party platform. Project 2025 is the extreme policy and personnel playbook for Trump's second term. Not according to Trump, right? Nobody tells Trump what to do. He might not. We'll see. But they say that should scare the hell out of the American people, said Amar Moussa. On Thursday, as the country celebrated Independence Day and Biden prepared for his television interview after his halting debate performance, the president's campaign posted on X a shot from the dystopian TV drama The Handmaid's Tale, right? Because obviously it's about theocracy, isn't it? It's going to be, let me see if I can find that right quick. There's Joe Biden. That's not the president's. Let's see, so it had been yesterday. It's not 7 hours. I got to see that one. I didn't see that one yet. But of course, The Handmaid's Tale was about a theocracy, and they're so scared of a theocracy popping up. There's no Christian is interested in a theocracy. Trump's not interested in theocracy, not even a Christian. Anyway, showing a group of women in the show's red dresses and white hats standing in formation by a reflecting pool with the cross at the far end where the Washington Monument should be. The story revolves around women who are stripped of their identities and forced to give birth to children for other couples in a totalitarian regime. Isn't it cute? Isn't it cute that Joe Biden is pointing the finger and calling someone else totalitarian? That's interesting. Okay. So let's get down to this. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court decision, and we're going to talk about lawfare just a bit. Trump versus the United States. What actually happened here? Did the Supreme Court create a dictator for life, or did the Supreme Court actually create more accountability for presidents, current and past? Listen to this. You probably won't hear this take many other places. I want to start off by asking you this question. How many presidents in the history of the United States have ever been convicted, have ever been brought up on charges, much less convicted of a crime before Donald Trump? How many? There would be a goose egg. It's never happened. The only reason the Supreme Court made this ruling is because Donald Trump was being prosecuted by his political opponents. It's also funny, too, the UK Independent published the headline, Supreme Court awards Trump some immunity from prosecution. And that's true. Remember, you heard earlier, absolute immunity. That's in there. But also it's some immunity, because there's 3 tiers of this here. What's funny is this headline is accurate as it states the exact verbiage in the Supreme Court decision. However, later in the day, the Independent, perhaps after receiving instruction from the social engineers in Washington, or maybe just for maximum effect, once they saw what everyone else was saying, they modified and expanded that headline to the same article that reported what the court had stated, with the following more jarring version. Biden warns Trump can do whatever he pleases if elected, as Republicans relish Supreme Court immunity ruling. So these mainstream news outlets are simply incapable of forming original opinions or doing any objective analysis of anything. They just repeat what they see. They repeat what they're told. All right, so we want to let you know about the Coffee and COVID blog. You want to check that one out on over on Substack. You can probably put in Coffee and COVID. You can probably search that on your I don't know, whatever, your web browser. You'll probably find it that way if you don't have Substack. Let's talk about this Supreme Court decision and what it actually did. It actually create a dictator? Is Trump now king? Are any presidents king? Remember, no president had ever been tried or convicted of anything before Donald Trump. So, this is Jeff Childers, who is an attorney. Is that right, Summer?
Yes.
Is he a pastor?
No.
But, okay, all right. Not a pastor.
I don't
but
believe
a Christian,
so.
But a Christian. Okay. You're not going to believe how great yesterday's news really was, the Supreme Court decision. It's historic. It's unprecedented. Here's a fact. The Supreme Court did not end any of Trump's cases. So they didn't do that. But the decision was a game changer. Just not in the way DC and the media propaganda wing are reporting it. First of all,
he's an attorney and author.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's his proper title.
So here, first of all, what the decision, the Supreme Court decision did not do. Let's see. Let's get right here. I'll get this one up here for you.
This nation was...
Oops. Oh, here's Biden talking about it, right? The rule of law. We played this for you already.
Founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law. Not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do.
All right. Is that true, though?
It is such a dramatic thing to say.
Yeah.
Like,
he's a king, right? It sounds
huge. It's a huge thing to be claiming.
It's like, as Childers says, low information
voters.
Progressives, yeah, they don't care. They don't check anything out. All right. So, first of all, what the Supreme Court decision did not do, it did not totally immunize the president. Instead, it created a 3-tier test with, let's see, it did provide Trump with some immunity. Democrats desperately hope for some distraction from Biden's terrible debate, and that's really what the news cycle is about right now. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do, they've said. It's a dangerous precedent, is what Biden said. 3 liberal justices were equally unhinged. We read Sotomayor's comments the other day, but let's just cut through all the noise. Regarding presidential immunity, the Supreme Court announced a brand new 3-tier immunity test. So while they're telling you that President, you can get away with anything now. By the way, Joe Biden is the president right now, right? If they believe that, they take advantage of it. It's because they know this is not true. They're selling you a line. First of all, Tier 1, you can see on your screen there. Hopefully that's big enough for you. The president is absolutely immune within his exclusive sphere of constitutional authority. What does that mean? He's absolutely immune from what exactly? Well, he can negotiate treaties if you happen to make a mistake there, or he can issue pardons. Nobody can challenge him on issuing pardons. Presidents have done that forever. No one's ever been convicted or accused or charged with anything.
Well, here's the thing, though. They are. It's like there's a big incident, right? Problem, reaction, solution. So they create this scene. They orchestrate this scene, and then because of this, now we've got to go and change a bunch of policies now and rewrite a bunch of laws. So look at what they're setting up for whoever comes into office.
Yeah. All right. So this first tier, where it does say the president, doesn't say Donald Trump, but it says the president is absolutely immune in this small, well-defined tier, which includes things like directing military operations. All right. Tier 2. All right, so there's one very narrow, well-defined area where any president, where we would want our president to be able to act without the fear of his opponents attacking him with charges. All right, the second tier. This is the first tier was total immunity for constitutional acts. Tier 2 is presumptive immunity for official acts. Once again, this is what you find when you read Trump versus the United States. Okay, this is what's in the decision, not the opinions about it or the breathless anxiety about it. Tier 2, presumptive immunity for official acts. So we've got constitutional acts, official acts, and the third one will be unofficial acts. For official acts, if the president acts officially as president, the act is immune. But a prosecutor can still proceed if they can show criminalizing that type of conduct would not hinder the presidential office or wouldn't hinder the president from doing his constitutional duty. All right? So that's tier 2, presumptive immunity for official acts, which the door is open there to charging the president with something still. Tier 2 answers the Democrats' most deranged temper tantrums, prosecuting presidents who order the military to assassinate, i.e. murder, their opponents would not harm the presidential office because presidents are not supposed to murder people. And it wouldn't hinder the presidential office to criminalize murder. All right. So now, tier 3. No immunity for a president when he's acting unofficially. The separation of powers does not bar a prosecution predicated on the president's unofficial acts. For example, the court said a president has zero immunity. You don't find that headline anywhere, do you? It doesn't say court decides president has zero immunity here. No, it's always absolute immunity on the first tier. Well, the court said a president has zero immunity when he acts as the leader of his political party or when he's pursuing his personal interests. I don't know, Well, let's just tell you what Childers says here, the attorney. This 3-tier system neither turns presidents into kings nor places presidents above the law. The decision only resolved a couple of the worst counts in a single case against Donald Trump. Once again, the only reason the Supreme Court heard this case is because the progressives, the left, were persecuting their political opponent, Donald Trump. If they hadn't done that, this would have never happened. It wouldn't have been brought up. All right, so now here's the biggest point of all. Are you ready for this, Summer? You ready to be wowed?
Wow me.
You ready to be wooed?
Woo me.
Here's the biggest point of all. Before Donald Trump, no president was ever prosecuted for a crime. No president past or no current president or past president. Not even for droning an Iraqi wedding, Barack Obama. Not even for illegal wars, George W. Bush. Presidential prosecutions have never happened for any reason, and they have certainly broken some laws, Richard Nixon. All right. Don't miss this. Don't miss this point. This is the biggest point of all. Before Donald Trump, presidents obviously enjoyed de facto total immunity. Are you paying attention to this? Everything the media is telling you is upside down. Before this, presidents had total immunity. No president had ever been charged or tried or convicted for anything. And I'm sure some of them should have been. During the period of this de facto total immunity, during this period, the de facto total immunity rule reigned. The Supreme Court never had to address presidential immunity. The only reason that they addressed presidential immunity was because, again, the left was persecuting their political opponent, Donald Trump. There were no cases. That is how absolute the immunity of the president was before the Supreme Court decision. But now, after this decision with this clear 3-tier test in place, now the court has crafted a de jure, a legal rubric. Presidents who do illegal things now can be prosecuted much easier. Yesterday's new 3-tier test provides a clear procedure for prosecuting, for example, Barack Obama for drone striking an Iraqi wedding, perhaps. Or it's now possible to prosecute Joe Biden for vaccine mandates. In other words, the High Court incinerated de facto presidential immunity and replaced it with a clear de jure prosecutorial process. Okay, that's what happened. Well, that's one astute observation of what happened. 7 points from this. There has been a paradigm shift. The court has moved from an unwritten de facto total immunity to a more defined legal framework. Now presidents are more vulnerable than they were before. They're not dictators now. They're not free to do whatever they want with no risk of prosecution. Now they're more vulnerable because here's the rubric. Now there's a clear process, this 3-tier test, a roadmap for potential prosecutions. While intended to provide some protection, this ruling might inadvertently make it easier to bring legitimate cases against presidents. That's the other point. Where it backfires a little bit on Trump and everyone else who's going to be president is that it actually makes it now easier for one party to bring charges against the sitting president of the opposite party. So don't let them lie to you and tell you that now the president has all this unmitigated authority. If that was true, why isn't Biden taking advantage of it right now? The irony of it all, right? By bringing these silly, creative claims against Donald Trump for keeping his ledger, the Supreme Court got an unprecedented opportunity to end forever the silent, implicit protection previously enjoyed by every other previous president. Like when they mandate vaccines, for example. So according to Attorney Childers, the American people actually won here. So don't buy into the propaganda that they're trying to tell you over here.
Legally, no limit to what Trump will do and can do. It's where we start the hour. It's where we'll start this hour every day, as long as there is news.
I wonder why they don't go into the document like we've done for you here. Well, I haven't gone into it. It's 119 pages. But if you care to look at it, you know what? Why don't I'm gonna drop this in the description. So if people want to look at it, I'm gonna drop this.
Sounds good.
I'll drop it in the description, but I'll drop it under the links to our Substack articles. I'll put the link in there if you wouldn't mind putting the text over it. It's called Trump versus United States Supreme Court decision. All right. So there it is. It's now in the description as of now, without a title, but it's there. And so in this first part here, within the first 5 or 10 pages, you hear John Roberts' decision And this is where you'll read about this 3-tier system that they've got in place now. All right, so did the Supreme Court create a dictator for life? Or did the Supreme Court actually create more accountability for presidents, current and past? You can decide for yourself, okay? And I will share someone who we respect very much, John Whitehead, who writes for the Rutherford Institute.
Constitutional attorney.
He's a constitutional attorney who took a different view of this. Let's see. He starts out his article by saying that yes, it did make the president a dictator. But here's what he says down below. He goes, but this isn't anything new. He says, in recent years, American presidents have claimed the power to completely and almost unilaterally alter the landscape of this country for good or ill. Now, Summer has an article on our Substack over here. If I can find our Substack, it's here somewhere. There it is. Our Substack. Oh boy, what's it called? The Emergency Powers article. I'll find it right quick. It won't be too hard. We go back here, see them all. There's an article. You can check it out. You go back to, wow, it's some here, the end of the nation state. That's a good one too. It's back here. Let's see. The Moloch machine.
It's in all caps.
Yeah. Appetite for distraction. That's the UFO stuff. Yeah, there's another article that Summer put up. Western countries increasingly under lawfare against the gospel of Jesus Christ. Goodness, how far back is that article?
We wrote it quite a while ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we wrote it back before Israel and the BRICS. Here we go. We're getting close to it there. There's how the Civil Rights Act of 1964 empowered the progressive movement to take over. Back before the Maui COVID tyranny, who's protecting your freedoms. Goodness, man, this is a ways back here. We're back in 2023 here. There it is, Tracking Dystopia, Abuse of Power. Might want to put that one. Let's add that one under there too. Gosh.
Okay.
Excuse me. It's about 100 degrees in our office tonight. There's no air conditioning in here tonight, so bear with us. In this article, this is one of the longer articles. We explain how Summer's article here. We worked on it a little bit together, but this is Summer's article here. Explains how since the 70s, they've been using emergency powers to rule by dictate, or rule by decree. And so you can check this one out. That'll be in the description as well. All right, back to the 3 tiers. Now, we've shown you the 3 tiers. We've told you no president was ever convicted of anything before Donald Trump. So before Trump, presidents had total immunity. It's pretty clear. No one even thought to charge a president with anything. In fact, and right up through the 60s and into the 70s, maybe a little bit into the 80s, the press wouldn't even cover presidents who were having affairs. They wouldn't even touch that stuff. So what happened? You can decide for yourself. John Whitehead says, all of the imperial powers amassed by past presidents to kill American citizens without due process, to detain suspects indefinitely, to strip Americans of their citizenship rights, to carry out mass surveillance on Americans without probable cause, to suspend laws during wartime, to disregard laws with which you might disagree, to conduct secret wars and convene secret courts, to sanction torture, to sidestep the legislatures and courts with executive orders and signing statements to direct the military to operate beyond the reach of the law, to operate a shadow government, Barack Obama, Henry Kissinger, and to act as a dictator and a tyrant above the law and beyond any real accountability, were passed down from one president to the other, from Clinton to Bush to Obama to Trump. Yes, even to Trump and to Biden. And it will be passed along to whoever comes next. Right? So this is nothing new. Right? In fact, it's our opinion that what the Supreme Court has done is now they've made it possible for even presidents who are still living. I'm talking to you, Barack Obama. Now you're in the hot seat. Now it's possible for, you might have to be a little more careful about how you berate the conservatives now. They have the House. Acquired these powers that they've been using were acquired as our article will tell you. They've been using executive orders, decrees, memorandums, proclamations, national security directives. The national security directive is what who was the president when Kissinger when they did the population thing where they started doing the birth control around the. I can't remember which president it was. We did an article about that too. It was in the 70s. Mm-hmm. Ford. Might have been Gerald Ford. Anyway, when the executive branch, this national security directive, they put out this, it became American foreign policy to do population control in India and Africa. We've got a video about that. It's called, it's a video about excess deaths. I think it is. I don't know how that video is still on YouTube. So check it out and watch it while you still can. It may get us knocked off the platform altogether one day, but it's still sitting there and it's explosive. So you see, the Supreme Court did not make the president a dictator. It merely confirmed what we've been warning about all along. The president is already an imperial, unaccountable, and unconstitutional dictator with permanent powers. Absolute power absolutely corrupted the presidency. The government does not voluntarily relinquish those powers once it acquires them and uses them and inevitably abuses them. Now, remember, emergency powers, this is also how the civil rights legislation was enacted, right? We've got this big problem of racism down here in the South, in two main states. And the problem is the people who live there democratically elected these leaders who enacted these laws that everyone there wanted, except for the black people, of course. Now, just because they made them laws, it didn't mean they were right. They were wrong, but they were legal. Remember now, most of what the Nazi regime accomplished was done legally. But the point is this: how did the federal government abolish those segregation laws, the Jim Crow laws in the South? They used emergency orders, emergency powers. And they promised that once they got racism under control, they would put that genie back in the bottle and wouldn't use emergency powers anymore. How do you think that worked out? Of course, it continued. And now there have been some emergencies that have been declared that have been renewed once a year for over 20 years now. 9/11, that's still emergency is still active.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to think about, okay, we all know what happened in 2020. I defer back to this quite a bit, but I mean, everything moved in lockstep, regardless of what the laws are. And so they can be sitting there saying that, oh, now Trump is going to be a king and he's going to be a dictator. But and maybe they did change some policies up at the top with legislation and Supreme Court and this, that, and the other. But the thing is at the end of the day, the people that are really in charge and in power are going to have immunity anyway, as we have seen. I mean, the corruption is just absolutely off the charts. And why should we believe any of this? Because why? They will say anything to remain in power. Yep. And they'll say anything also to destroy the morale of the country. They want to make us implode. So, keep that in mind. I mean, this is all about culture jamming, and this is about taking down this perceived colonialist empire that, what I'm saying? So by any means necessary, they're going to say whatever they want to get this done and to do the maximum amount of destruction.
Yeah, there's no question. Yeah, that's a good point. And so that brings us down to lawfare, specifically, excuse me. Now, as Summer's been keeping you guys updated on this condition of lawfare, that we have lawfare, generally, just very briefly, what's been happening to Trump would be considered lawfare. Lawfare is also something that's done.
Well, multicultural policy would be under lawfare as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Health equity would be lawfare.
In Tommy Robinson's documentary called Lawfare, it does a very good job of laying out exactly how it works. Lawfare works like this. First of all, you have to have two-tier policing. That means you have to have a situation where, for instance, if you're Antifa and you're out in the streets, you're burning down federal buildings, you don't get prosecuted for that. But if you can be identified as part of as a Trump supporter,
the preferred class versus the deplorables.
Right. So that's two-tier policing. Secondly, you've got to have a politicized judiciary. Right. This is way more prevalent in the UK, and it's with our separation of powers in the U.S., it's still a good system. We still have a good system. And I think what the Heritage Foundation is really thinking and trying to do is just to restore the system and cut away some of the nonsense. But anyway, lawfare, two-tier policing, and a politicized judiciary. Number 3, you have to have hostile security services. Right? You have to have the FBI in America to. Oh, by the way, there's another thing that Barack Obama could be charged and tried and perhaps convicted for: illegally spying on Donald Trump in the campaign in 2016. He did that, and he knew also the Russiagate documents that turned out to be fake, that the Clintons bought, paid for, and Obama knew it. So there's 3 things that we found that Barack Obama could be charged for under this new 3-tier rubric that the Supreme Court has set up. So anyway, hostile security services, and when the FBI is spying on political opponents, when they're surveilling the citizens, you have to have a controlled media. Number 4. Well, that one's pretty simple. Number 5, you have to have indoctrination. At the level of schools and universities, the academy, and number 6, the masses have to be mobilized. In other words, this is the mass formation. As we saw in 2020 with the pandemic, so-called, people respond to media messaging. Mass formation psychosis. People do things that are not in their best interest. People do things that ultimately will harm them, like walk around with 2 masks on and gloves inside the car. They'll do these things because of the controlled media and the indoctrination. Number 7, you have to eliminate dissidents. Dissidents like Summer over there. She's a high octane dissident.
I'll be the first to get hauled off in the first wave.
I'll never allow it. And number 8, re-education for people like Summer. Right? That was for people who can't think in terms of dialectic like us, and probably you as well. That's basically the 8 elements to lawfare in a system. 2-tier policing, a politicized judiciary, hostile security services, police and FBI, controlled media, indoctrinate the citizens, mobilize the masses, mass formation, eliminate dissidents, and for those who don't stop, re-educate them. We intend at some point to do a more detailed show on lawfare and to go through each one of those points. and we'll come back. Now let's give you some examples on what lawfare looks like. You know what it looks like with former President Donald Trump. How about now, once again, because we're talking about these people doesn't mean that we endorse them or that we think they're good guys. We're just telling, these are people who have been politically persecuted. Ex-Trump advisor Steve Bannon. He's I think he's one of the, he works over at Breitbart Media now, which is a conservative, right-leaning organization as well. He was sent to prison for, it's stuff I'm not going to be able to talk about here because it's about the January day after the 5th in 2021. It's about all that stuff. And it was, it's a little more complicated, but in the interest of time, let's see, do we have a video? Here, we do have a video of Bannon explaining it himself because he had to report for prison 4 days ago. Let's listen to what he says.
Look, folks, if it took me going to prison, because remember, the reason I chose Danbury, I asked for Danbury for a very specific reason. Back in the only other person that's ever been sent to prison for a congressional subpoena, or congressional subpoena, not going to a House subpoena, for contempt, held in contempt, was Ring Lardner Jr. Back in the 1940s. During the House Un-American Activity investigation, Columbia Studio fired him, okay, because of his political beliefs. And then he was found guilty. They sent it to the DOJ. He was sent to prison. He was sent to this prison. That's why I requested Danbury, because there's no difference in his fight than in our fight. I'm a political prisoner of Nancy Pelosi. I'm a political prisoner of Merrick Garland. I'm a political prisoner of Joe Biden and the corrupt Biden establishment. And you saw on Thursday all the lies that they told, right? All the lies they told. Any group that would sit there and lie to you about the shape of the President of the United States with the national security element of that, lied about the 2020 election, they've lied about COVID, they've lied about everything that they've done to the American people, and they're not going to stop. Until we stop them, they're not going to stop. And the way you stop them is you do things like this. Hey, if they're going to send me to prison, it's not going to matter if we take this fight and take it up the next level, okay?
All right, so that's Bannon, all right? And
today, former Trump White House...
He's not the only one. Several months ago, Peter Navarro, same thing.
Today, former Trump White House advisor Peter Navarro became the first person from the Trump administration to go to prison over matters related to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. CBS's Robert Costa
matters related. Can't be too specific, can we?
Was convicted of contempt of Congress and remained defiant to the very end.
Navarro's going to prison today.
Peter Navarro made it clear he understood his fate this morning. And addressing reporters outside Miami's Federal Correctional Institution, the 74-year-old former Trump trade advisor said he wasn't happy about it.
I'm pissed. That's what I'm feeling right now. But I'm also afraid of only one thing. I'm afraid for this country, because what they're doing should have a chilling effect on every American, regardless of their party. If they come for me, they can come for you.
Navarro will live in an 80-person dormitory reserved for older inmates. He'll have access to a phone, email, and TV.
The president's going to sign another order.
Once a combative fixture at Trump's side, Navarro now becomes the first ever former White House official jailed for contempt of Congress. The 4-month sentence handed down after he defied a subpoena from the House January 6 committee, probing his role in trying to overturn the 2020 election.
The election's over, the voting's over, but the outcome is not.
Navarro was an advocate of a proposed scheme to help Trump stay in power.
A scheme,
the former president,
folks,
who continues to falsely claim the election was stolen and praises those who face prosecution for their conduct on January 6, said Navarro was wronged.
There was a string of lies.
This is conditioning
Yeah.
for the public.
Yeah, it
you know,
is.
Alex Jones.
Low information.
This is conditioning to get everybody used to this idea that, you know, you're going to get hauled off potentially if you say something that's against the party line, that's against the official narrative that they want you to have. So
Well, let's. So there's Bannon and Navarro, and there's also the rest of us are victims of lawfare too, in one way or another. There's an article from Revolver. We covered this story earlier this year. According to a report from Forbes, federal investigators obtained court-approved subpoenas for any YouTube viewers who watch tutorials on specific videos. In this case, it was videos about mapping via drones and augmented reality software. So, the investigators had been communicating with a suspected money launderer undercover. They sent them links to the relevant videos and demanded that Google identify anyone who had watched certain videos immediately following. The subpoena included names, addresses, telephone numbers, and browsing history for Google accounts for as many as 30,000 people, tracing traffic to the relevant videos for 1 week in January 2023. The subpoenas likely violated the First and Fourth Amendments of the Constitution, which protect freedom of speech and restrict unreasonable search and seizure. Was this Donald Trump? I'm sorry, Summer. Who was in office when this happened? Whose Department of Justice was responsible for this? That's right. It was the people in power right now. These kind of breaches typically aren't even acted on unless a victim fights them in court, which is what we're trying to do here. Also, we saw this too. In 2023, Minnesota legislature and governor added a new category of so-called human rights called gender identity to the Minnesota Human Rights Act. Now, this might not sound like much, but it included no corresponding religious exemption for churches, schools, and citizens, meaning that churches would have to play along with this ridiculousness. It sets the stage for persecution of Christians. If the state can tell churches and schools what they can and cannot say or do about gender identity, because it's a human right now, then it can on other subjects too. An amendment to correct this violation of First Amendment rights was voted down in the House and Senate committees. So see, our government is messed up. It does need an enema. And maybe that's what the Heritage Foundation is trying to do. So leaves you with the concerning questions, doesn't it? Would a person be punished for using truthful pronouns when they're talking to someone? Would you be punished when you refuse to bear false witness and co-sign the sin of another by acknowledging their gender identity pronouns, like calling this man a woman? Can pastors, teachers, or anyone else be charged with a crime for speaking or writing in opposition to transgender surgery or puberty blockers for minors? If parents try to protect their minor children from these practices, will they be charged with crimes under these kinds of laws? Of course, they could be. Could the child be removed from their custody if parents refuse to follow such laws? We talked about this back in early in 2023. We covered that case where in Washington State and in California, I think maybe Oregon too, where shelters were taking in children who said they had gender dysphoria and not telling the parents they were there if they came looking for them. Yeah, so this is where the state takes over the children, just like, I guess it was Margaret Mead or Sanger, just like they all wanted from the start. What if a Christian school or church, a counseling center, a charity, perhaps maybe Christian ministry, even a media ministry? What about an anti-abortion group? What if they refuse to hire a transgender identifying person? What if Armor of Truth refused to hire a transgender identifying person? We don't have, just two of us here. Minnesota government has crossed the Rubicon with this law. And with similar laws in the past, the state has protected religious liberty by including an exemption clause, but not in this case. So, and there's another example. From the ADL.org, U.S. white supremacist propaganda incidents reached historic levels in 2023. What do they mean by that? Anti-Semitic propaganda increased by 30%, according to an assessment by the ADL Center on Extremism. The reason this has happened is because they redefined hundreds of words, hundreds of terms and phrases to fit within their rubric of qualifying hate speech. For example, the ADL is now saying that the term 100% is a white supremacist trope. So, what do we do, folks? What do we do about all this? You can create all the special days and proclamations you want. You can pass all the laws you can. But here's the most important question. that I would like to ask everyone in government, everyone listening, everyone how will you find peace with God? How will you defeat death? This is so far down on the priority list for these folks. When we see this cropping up in the church, especially, we must remind them that Christ, the true Jesus Christ revealed in the Scriptures, called his followers to deny the self, to take up their cross and to follow him. So this means that our prayer for our families, for the church, and for our nation and world must be that Christ would be glorified and overshadow everything. All of Christ for all of life. In other words, Christ must mean more than all of this. Now, we were talking about earlier, Summer, about how it's false reporting, fear-mongering, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're just making things up.
Yeah.
And they'll say they're justified in doing it because they're saving the country from Donald Trump.
That's what both sides are arguing.
Yeah. And so these people here, they're going to moralize at you because you don't agree with their socialism or their communism. Well, let's just talk about it for a second.
Well, here are their points right here. This silence is violence when you don't speak up. Reflexive energy is the aim to shape society. The reaction is the real action, dialectical political warfare. Anything that breaks or disrupts Western hegemony. Decolonization is always violent, according to Frantz Fanon, the popularized Marxist. So just keep this in mind, why some voices are truly loud and truly are disruptive. They are trying to break our cultures apart. Western culture specifically, we see it happening in Western culture. Anywhere where people are accustomed to living free and having liberty, they want to squash that out. Any individualism, countries that have an individualistic nature, they want to squash that out. They have to train it out of people.
And that's how they do it. Exactly. You're exactly right. And how they do it now, if it's not, remember, this is how we've talked about this before, how communitarianism works is what I'm calling it, communitarianism. Some people call it communofascism or whatever. I think communitarianism works as a good term for it because what it really means is that you don't have rights anymore. The perceived community has rights. And as Summer just pointed out here, they're going to coerce you into cooperating. For instance, let's just use this example of gun rights. They don't need to pass any gun laws. They just have this smart city, the only place that you can get food for 200 miles, the only place that you can find shelter for 200 miles. And you're more than welcome to have your gun, but you can't come into our city with our shelter and our food. You have to leave it outside. That kind of thing is what we're talking about with communitarianism. But the fact that they're doing all of this lying, holding government representatives accountable is essential to freedom. The American people can't know everything that happens in federal and state politics. Therefore, the media's role is extremely important as the first line of defense against tyrants rising in the government. Honesty and making just and fair judgments are essential to freedom. So when the media engages in partisan reporting, when they obfuscate or embellish specific facts, like we've just pointed out they've done here, or when they just flat out lie, then they're guilty of breaking the sacred trust of the people that they serve. People who depend on the media to know what's happening in the government. Right? Remember, it's called the fourth estate. Right? It's there to keep the government accountable. Not anymore. Fairness, individual accountability, and avoiding unjust condemnation based on associations are critical for reporters and for government. Ezekiel 18:20 and Deuteronomy 24:16 indicate that each person is responsible for his own sin. So this idea of guilt by association, we were talking about this the other day, Summer, right? You were taking exception to the fact that anybody who agreed with certain opinion, who had a conservative idea about something, was a Trump supporter.
Right.
Guilt by association.
Yeah.
They just lump you in. Well, the Bible says that's a sin. Ezekiel 18:20 and Deuteronomy 24:16. Each person is responsible for his own sin. Guilt by association is a straightforward sin. And in the Old Testament, it was a sin that was condemnable by death. All right? A reporter is not free from responsibility either when they say, well, my boss made me report the story with this certain bias. That doesn't fly. Not according to the supreme law. Every person, each person is accountable for his own actions. John 7:24 says, do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. Proverbs 18:17. The first to state his case seems right until another comes and examines him. So that's why we have to come back and examine these media talking heads regularly. The book of Proverbs is known as wisdom literature. It provides moral and ethical instruction for wisdom, integrity, and the fear of the Lord. Proverbs 20:23 says, the Lord detests differing weights, and dishonest scales do not please him. Focus on that word there. The Lord detests differing weights, and dishonest scales do not please him. So this word detests, this is a Hebrew word. Obviously, it's Old Testament. It's used here. It's to'eva. I'm not a Hebrew scholar, so I'm going to leave it at that. But it means something abominable. Something abominable. The Lord thinks it's abominable to practice guilt by association, to lie, to evaluate things falsely. Differing weights. Literally, this Hebrew word here means a stone and a stone, one for one, referring to the practice of using heavier or lighter weights to cheat in trading. Dishonest scales implies fraudulent or deceitful scales. So the emphasis here in this passage is dishonesty. Dishonesty in business, specifically, is what's in context here, but the specific mention of weights and scales can be extended by application to a general principle of honesty in all dealings. It serves as a metaphor for personal and communal ethics, urging believers to conduct themselves with integrity in all aspects of life, especially when you're here in these positions where it affects an entire nation. This verse implies that ethical conduct is not merely a social expectation, but it's a divine mandate, pleasing to God and reflective of his kingdom values. God has a strong moral stance against this kind of dishonesty, against any dishonesty, particularly in business and positions of authority where people can easily be taken advantage of. Right? We rely on the media to tell us what's happening on their beat, where they cover the government, and they're not doing it. They're lying to us. And so the use of the word detests here, abominable, underscores the severity with which God views this kind of behavior. This disapproval is not just about the act itself, but it's about the implications, about what it causes, this deceit and injustice, because it corrupts societal relationships and trust and breaks down social cohesion. Dishonesty is detestable. Integrity or consistent honesty is foundational to a society, to a nation, to a free nation. It's foundational to economic stability as well. God loves righteousness and fairness because his nature is just and true. God's nature demands that his people reflect his attributes in their conduct, particularly in justice and fairness. So for Christians, this verse serves as a call to us, not to call out in judgment of everything, but it's a call to us to embody this integrity and honesty in all dealings, to live righteously. Now, people sometimes criticize me, and I'm going to say me specifically because I'm usually the one making this argument, that we shouldn't sit by and watch it all burn. As Christians, we should be involved. Now, I am no Seven Mountain Mandate person. I'm not telling you that we need to invade the government. We need to invade nations and Christianize them. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying we need to live out our faith. That's how That's how the world has changed. That's how this nation can be returned to. We put out an article yesterday, right? And it was called Make America Good Again. I forgot about that. Yeah, there it is. Make America Good Again. And the point there is, we hear, especially during this election season, make America great again, make America great again. Well, we have to make America good again before we can make America great again. And the point here is, which you heard in our July 4th show, if you heard that, freedom requires faith and virtuous self-government. Freedom requires a people of faith to keep it. And faith requires freedom. Religion is not true religion unless it is uncoerced and free. And then the key is virtuous self-government. And the only way to virtuously govern yourself and virtuously be involved in your local government is to be a person of faith. Matthew 7:12, Jesus teaches that, teaches what is often called the golden rule. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. Sums up the law and the prophets. Jesus is telling us right here, here's how you walk like a Christian in the world. Do to others what you would have them do to you. If you don't want to be treated poorly, don't treat others poorly. If you don't want to be talked about badly, don't talk about others badly. This proverb encourages, or the proverb from before, Proverbs 20, goodness, which one was it? The proverb we had, 20:28. I've got it up here in my, I lost everything. We had to reboot everything here right before we came on live. So we had a little bit of, if you got the alert on your mobile app, we're sorry for making you wait a little while, but we had some confusing and confounding technical difficulties here. Self-examination, ethical behavior. Believers are prompted to consider their own practices and ensure that our own practice, check your own heart first to see that you're in alignment with God's standards. Because you embody trust and justice, and then it spreads. Scripture warns against spreading false reports and making accusations without proper evidence, underscoring the need for careful and truthful assessment of situations and individuals. So this is why our nation is in shambles at the moment, because everybody in power is lying. And that includes Trump. That includes the right. But that doesn't mean that we just sit it out. That doesn't mean that we just, all of it be damned. That's not what we're called to do. And you'll see in this article here, Make America Good Again. As Alexis de Tocqueville said, nothing is more wonderful than the art of being free, but nothing is harder than to learn how to use freedom. See, it's interesting that not any people group can be free. People have to be ready to be free. And it was a one-of-a-kind situation in America in the mid and late 1700s, where the people, through two great awakenings, or through the first great awakening for sure at first, people had been prepared. They understood the biblical foundation of freedom and self-government. And so they were ready for this experiment in freedom. Exodus 23:1, you shall not spread a false report. Shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. 1 Timothy 5:19 says, you don't accuse someone except on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. So love and forgiveness are central to Christian conduct. A spirit of charity, understanding, rather than hasty condemnation. 1 Corinthians 13, the famous, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Matthew 7:1-5, judge not that you be not judged. You hear that one used a lot, right? You're not supposed to judge anything because of that verse, but you got to keep reading. Of course, we have to make judgments about other people. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use it, it will be measured to you. So when we make judgments about other people, this is telling us, you use this standard, not your own. We must call things by their correct names. If something is evil, we call it evil. If it's good, we call it good. These are principles of individual accountability, fair judgment, truthfulness, and love. Christians are called to evaluate individuals and actions based on their own merit rather than unjust associations, as these progressives do so often. Lump everyone and you're just a Trump supporter. You're just a far-right radical. People in the media talk a lot about values and justice and integrity and community. However, their actions are deceptive, and they do not love the truth. Their actions are evil and destructive to the American Republic, and they're saying just the opposite to you. They're saying you got to watch out for this guy because he wants to destroy America. So are you feeling burned out? Do you think this is all too much? The reason I'm going to put this piece in here is because I saw in a comment during our last show, or second to last show, someone was saying, we learn a lot about this stuff. And he said, I appreciate learning a lot about it, but do we know too much about it? And we've said this before too. Don't be studying occultism, right, because you want to expose it to everybody. You don't need to study occultism to do that. You don't need to study the false thing. You need to study the genuine article and know it. And that makes it easy to expose evil through the lens of the truth. Jonas Lajanen, that's some kind of Nordic name, I think, writing for Truth Script on July 1st, wrote an article called Antidote Against Burnout. Understanding the suffering. Right, he actually wrote this article in June of 2023, but Truth Script published it a couple days ago. The Apostle Paul knew that his sufferings were from the world, the flesh, and the devil, but his hope was in the perfect providence of God. Paul saw his trials as the very sufferings of Christ. 2 Corinthians 1:5, for just as the sufferings of Christ are ours in abundance, so also our comfort is abundant through Christ. The Lord Jesus Christ was sought out to be destroyed from the womb to his death on the cross. He faced vile accusations. He faced resistance, unbelief, betrayal, loneliness, physical violence, and ultimately death. His last moments were an ample sign to his enemies that he was a fraud. Why would God let him be deserted at the time of his greatest need? Why would someone do him great harm? Why would no one be willing to stand up for him and take his side? Well, we have the answer in Scripture. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe you're feeling shocked by the hardships that seem to have no end. Well, as we read in the Scriptures, you should be in the Scriptures every day. Make them part of your life. Make them part of who you are and live by them. Because we learn and we're comforted by the fact that all we see happening in the world is under God's sovereignty. That's what we learn when we know how to discern these things through the lens of Scripture. All of it is working for the good of those who love God, no matter what it is. It might look like it's going to hell in a handbasket, but the truth is, God hasn't turned his back. It's all under God's sovereignty, under his providence. But it is understandable to be overwhelmed. And it's understandable when we think about receiving Christ's sufferings ourselves. It's a scary prospect, the idea of spiritual attack. The idea of not spiritual attack, being attacked by other elements in your own society. However, sufficient grace and comfort are available from the one who made and fulfills all good promises. So we often say and sing that Christ is worthy. I'm convinced that means perseverance. Demas deserted Paul and left the faith because he never really grasped this point. I believe that the primary cause of burnout and being overwhelmed is a problem of the heart. It's our weakness. A follower of Christ will have many perfect excuses to quit, to disengage. Everyone has their limit, and you can only take so much, right? And maybe you're thinking, the slander, the unreasonable attitudes, the ingratitude, it's too much. The lying. And I'm no stranger to these thoughts. I'm not any better than anyone else. The Bible promises that the work of the gospel will be painful. What grounds do we have then to expect anything else? Local churches and leaders should prepare men and their wives to embrace this reality, rather than preaching lukewarm messages about 10 easy steps to financial prosperity in 2024. Pastors and elders, too, must teach believers not to expect glory, to not expect success, to not accept applause in the public square, to expect to not be appreciated. As Christians, it's crucial to remember that our lives are built on the sufficiency of Christ and Christ alone. Paul endured real pain because Christ was worth it. And in his weakness, God was glorified and Christ was magnified. And the best part of the story is what Jesus said as part of the Great Commission, Matthew 28. The Lord will stand by you always, when no one else will. Paul didn't hide his pain. He wasn't superhuman. He didn't act like a stoic, pretending that everything was all right and that he could make it without the help of others. Paul asked for prayers often. But here's a very important point that you have to take seriously. We should never pray to ask God to remove our suffering. Prayer should not be seen as a solution to remove suffering, because the Bible does not give us the right to pray against the providence of God. As John Flavel, old Puritan, wrote, "Complain to God you may, but complain about God you may not." We can't pray against receiving the sufferings of Christ. Do you know what an honor it is to suffer with Christ? You have to see it and understand it that way. These sufferings are God's means of sanctification. You're being tried in the flames of affliction. It's the way God sanctifies us. It's the way God makes us like Christ. Romans 5, 3 through 5. What kind of prayer should we utter then? Maybe something like, help me to see Christ as worthy. Help me to see my sufferings as his sufferings. A blessed gift from heaven to have a small taste of the pain that he endured for me because he loved me. Let me not look at the pain of the Son of God on the cross and then say to my soul, he's not worthy of mine. One major difference between the Christians that we read about in, say, the Acts, especially Acts chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, but specifically, it keeps on, but specifically there. A major difference between those Christians and us today is this. Christians in the first century understood, and the second and third century too, understood that persecution is the normal condition for Christ's followers. Christians in America, Christians in the West in general, don't know this. Prosperity gospel The word faith movement has got us all thinking that God's blessing is always prosperity and good health. Well, we believe that comfort and having good jobs, nice possessions, nice homes, and access to everything is normal for Christians. Wrong. That is the wrong idea. Look at this. Because these Nigerian Christians who are suffering right now, don't these Black Lives Matter? More than 365 million Christians. We actually have an article on our Substack, and would like to, maybe this would be a good one too. So we might have too many links.
Yeah, we've got like 6 already under the video.
Okay, well you can just go to if you go to the if you have the Armor of Truth mobile app, just click on the bottom on the blog or the articles tab, and you'll find it here. But this one is this is an article we had. More than 365 million Christians suffer high levels of persecution and discrimination for the faith.
Yeah, it's a really good article.
Yeah. Let me see. I'm going to find it. There it is.
Has a lot of information in there.
Yep, there it is. Now, the cool thing about this article is if you go to this article and you scroll down, you'll find the video. You'll find, here's Daniel's video about the, is this Daniel and us? This is us. Yep, this is us, I believe. Yep, that's us. Look at me putting my headphones in. Daniel having a sip of coffee. Anyway, this is a good video with our brother Daniel from, he's living in Slovakia right now. And Summer's got tons of good links in here for you to check out that have to do with persecution. So, persecution is the normal state for Christians in the world. And the book of Acts is a historical account of early Christian church following Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension. And that early section of the book of Acts highlights the foundation of the church, the empowerment of believers through the Holy Spirit, and the beginning of the church's mission to spread the gospel of Jesus. In chapter 1, before his ascension from the Mount of Olives, Jesus instructs his apostles to stay in Jerusalem and wait for the Holy Spirit. Chapter 2, on the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit descends upon the apostles, enabling them to speak in many languages so that all those in attendance could hear. All those who had heard of Christ and who had made treks and journeys to Jerusalem would hear the gospel spoken in their own language. Peter delivered a powerful sermon on that day, leading to the conversion of about 3,000 people in one day. So these early believers form a close-knit community, sharing their possessions and meeting regularly for teaching, fellowship, breaking bread, and prayer. Chapter 3 of Acts, Peter and John heal a man unable to walk his entire life. And for God's glory, it was clear that this man was not merely injured and wasn't fainting, but was well known in Jerusalem as being a crippled for birth. And the purpose of his life had been leading up to this moment. For 40 years he had been unable to walk. But for this moment, that worked out for the good of all of God's people. Peter and John healed this man at the temple gate called Beautiful. And that attracted a large crowd. And Peter seized the opportunity to preach to this great crowd about Jesus' resurrection and the need for repentance. And when we get to chapter 4, the temple authorities arrested Peter and John for preaching Christ and for performing miraculous healings in his name. They weren't upset that they had healed the man. They were really livid about the fact that they used that name, Christ. So they were arrested, and it was all about that name. They hate that name. And they will continue to hate that name. So understand this. There's power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. And ultimately, that's the only reason that we're here, is to tell you that message, the truth of the gospel. That you were born a rebel against God, that you've broken many, if not all, of God's laws, and according to what Jesus told us, we've broken all of them. Right? You don't have to commit murder. All you have to do is be angry at your brother, and you're guilty of it. So we've broken them all. Lust in your heart, anger in your heart. And there's only one way. There's only one way to peace and reconciliation, to redemption, to the relation, to be redeemed to that relationship with God. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever would believe in him would have eternal life. That one day, not only would we would we be saved from sin, we would be saved from the presence of sin altogether in that glorified state. And until then, we're being perfected. And part of being perfected means suffering. Often, if you read the first and second chapters of James, it makes it very clear that when we suffer trials, our faithful response grows us spiritually. We can't complain. We can't pray to God to take the suffering away. We ask God for strength to endure it, strength to respond faithfully to it, because that's how we grow spiritually. Well, that's all we've got for you tonight, Summer. Anything you want to add on the way out?
No. Thank you guys for being with us, as always, and we look forward to the next one with you.
I think I'll share this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you're going to do an...
No, I'm not now, later.
Okay.
Matthew Littlefield, I wanted to share this, not now, but later, why I'm not a conservative, because I think you said this the other day, and I thought it's a good point. Maybe people might think that we're carrying water for the Republican Party or something. So I like this article that Matthew Littlefield wrote. He's a Baptist preacher in Australia. And he's not even Reformed theology. But this is good. It's good stuff here.
He's Arminian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but he's got this article, Why I'm Not a Conservative, and I've read it, and I agree with what he says here. We don't need to take on those labels. He calls himself a transformationist, and that just means that we just live out the Great Commission. So maybe we'll share this sometime so that we can clarify. We're not here carrying water for any political party. We love the truth. We want to help our brothers and sisters, our viewers and readers, to be able to discern it and to understand the truth about what our duty is here, and that it's not always going to be easy, but to suffer for Christ is a blessing.
Right, to remember our identity in Christ, and to not get sucked into this left-right paradigm, so we want that message to come forward. Like, I know it's completely aggravating sometimes the way that they try to lead us into these conflicts with one another, but just to keep bringing that message forward, we've got to remember our identity in Christ first, and how we are salt and light in the world, and just stand in the truth and know that if God is with you, you're protected. And live in that, believe in that, and carry that light out into the world with no fear. We're not supposed to have a spirit of fear. So stay strong out there.
That's a good point. Let's leave it on that point. That's a mic dropper. God bless you, my friends. We'll see you next time.
Well, that's a rather interesting position coming from a man on a crusade against the evils of technology.
I'm not against technology, Doctor. I'm against the men who deify it at the expense of human truth.
Armor of Truth, live.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel and log on armoroftruth.net.